Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are pulling back the curtain and deconstructing the playbook used by the world's most powerful people. You know, the titans of industry, finance, and politics, the ones who literally reshape the world in their own image.
So what could Jeff Bezos, Andrew Carnegie, and Vladimir Putin possibly have in common? I mean, on the surface, not a whole lot, right? But if you dig a little deeper, you'll find that they're all playing from a very similar unwritten rulebook. It's this playbook for getting and holding on to incredible power, and it's been used for centuries all across the globe. All right, so here's how we're going to break this down. We're going to look at 4 key chapters. First, the unrelenting vision. Then, building the empire. After that, the contradictions of power. And finally, we'll get into crafting the legacy.
Okay, Chapter 1, The Unrelenting Vision. It's all about how one single, obsessive idea can change the world. You know, every big journey starts with a spark, right? Well, for these people, it's not a spark. It's more like a wildfire. It's this all-consuming focus on one thing, an opportunity that almost everyone else just completely misses. I mean, just take a look at Bill Gates. You have to remember, back then, computers were these massive things locked away in corporate basements. But Gates had this vision, this conviction, that they should be omnipresent in people's homes. He was so sure of it, he dropped out of Harvard to make it happen. That wasn't just a business idea. That one unwavering belief was the seed for the entire Microsoft empire. And then you've got John D. Rockefeller. Talk about force of will. He was described as being eternally, almost maniacally optimistic. When his partners said it was impossible to refine this new sour oil, basically oil that was full of gunk, he didn't listen. He offered to put up $3 million of his own dollars to figure it out. That relentless, almost crazy optimism is how he saw an opportunity where everyone else saw a dead end, and it's how he ended up dominating the entire industry. And you know, sometimes that vision isn't some grand master plan. It can be as simple as a hunch, a gut feeling that you just can't shake. Take the story of Texas oilman Roy Cullen. He just knew there was oil under a certain piece of land. So what did he do? Every single day, he'd go out and hold his handkerchief over a gas valve. And for weeks, nothing. And then, one morning, there it was, a faint yellow stain, the sign of oil. He bet absolutely everything on that little stain and ended up discovering one of the biggest oil fields in Texas history. So that brings us to Chapter 2, Building the Empire. Because once you have that vision, it's time to execute. And this is where things get intense. The motto here is, competition isn't a game, it's a war. It's not just about building something new, it's about total domination. And wow, does this quote just say it all? They fucked me over, I'll make them pay. That's Dennis Levine. For him, getting rejected for a job wasn't just a minor setback. It was personal. It was a declaration of war. And that vengeful drive is what fueled him to create one of the biggest insider trading rings in history. This really shows how financial innovation can be weaponized. So you've got these things called junk bonds. They're basically high-risk, high-reward securities. And this guy, Michael Milken, he turned them into a weapon. He created what was essentially a billion-dollar war chest for corporate raiders, letting them launch these hostile takeovers of massive, old-school companies. He didn't just play the game, he completely changed the rules. And building an empire is rarely a quick fight. It's usually a long, calculated campaign. Just look at Andrew Carnegie's battle for Homestead. This wasn't some random flare-up. In 1889, he tried to break the Steelworkers Union and failed. So what did he do? He played the long game. He spent 2 years investing in new tech, growing his workforce, and all the while, he and his manager, Henry Frick, were preparing for one final, decisive showdown to take complete control. And you better believe Titans use every single tool they can get their hands on. Take Amazon. They patented the one-click purchase. Now, was that just about making it easier for you to buy stuff? Nope. It was also a weapon. They immediately turned around and sued their main rival, Barnes & Noble. This forced them to add extra annoying steps to their checkout process. It was a brilliant and ruthless way to use the legal system to mess with the competition. And this playbook isn't just for business. You see the exact same patterns in politics. Look at Vladimir Putin's consolidation of power. He systematically took apart any checks and balances. First, he took control of the media. Then he made sure the legislature was on his side. And finally, he brought the country's biggest corporations under state control. It got to the point where people stopped calling it a government and started calling it Kremlin Inc., with Putin as the CEO. All right, so the empire is built. You've won. Now what?
Well, this brings us to Chapter 3, The Contradictions of Power. This is where the story gets really interesting because we start to see the isolation and the strange duality of the person at the very top.
What you often find is this massive split between the public persona and the private reality. I mean, think about Oprah Winfrey. To the world, she's all warmth and affection. But people who knew her privately described this sheet of ice between the person and the persona. Or look at John D. Rockefeller, publicly the richest man in the world. Privately, he's eating bread and milk for dinner and telling his wife they can't afford a new carriage unless they trade the old one in. It's a huge contradiction. And that pressure, that weight, it doesn't just affect the Titan, it can absolutely crush the next generation. This quote from the diary of John D. Rockefeller Jr. is just heartbreaking. He says, "I have no personal attraction. Nobody wants to sit next to me at the table." He just felt completely worthless, living in the shadow of his father's empire. He ends by saying, "I wish I was different in many ways than I am."
So it really makes you wonder, right? Is loneliness just the price you have to pay for that kind of power? I mean, if you spend your entire life building walls to protect your empire from everyone else, do you just end up trapped and alone inside those very same walls? And this leads us to the final act, the end game. Chapter 4, Crafting the Legacy. At this point, it's not about making more money or gaining more power. It's about controlling the story. It's the ultimate power play, using all that wealth to literally write your own history. And Andrew Carnegie literally wrote the book on this. His essay, The Gospel of Wealth, was this radical idea back in 1889. It argued that the super rich had a moral duty to give their fortunes away to improve society. And in doing so, he created the perfect playbook for transforming your image from a ruthless robber baron into a beloved public benefactor. But there was a catch. His charity came with some incredibly harsh judgment. Just listen to this. "It were better for mankind that the millions of the rich were thrown into the sea than so spent as to encourage the slothful, the drunken, the unworthy." So in his mind, he wasn't just a giver. He was a judge deciding who was worthy of help. His philanthropy was also a tool for social control. And really, you can see that same principle at play today. You've got today's philanthrocapitalists like Bill Gates funding what they call upfront discovery work. What does that mean? It means they use their vast private fortunes to test out ideas and basically set the agenda for what governments should be working on. So the legacy isn't just about giving money, it's about maintaining influence and control. Now, Henry Ford took a totally different approach to legacy. His big idea wasn't about giving his money away at the end. It was about building a self-sustaining system. He had this brilliant insight. Mass production doesn't work unless you have a mass market. He understood that his own workers needed to make enough money to buy his cars. That single idea basically became the foundation of the entire 20th century consumer economy. So, we've walked through the whole playbook, the vision, the aggression, the contradictions, the legacy building, and it leaves us with one big question, doesn't it? Is this Titan's playbook a guide we should follow, or is it a warning we should heed? Because it seems like the path to changing the world is paved with ruthless ambition and incredible personal sacrifice. So what do we take away from that? Is this a blueprint for success, or is it a cautionary tale about the real price of power?